evening all. Well, this week was a tale of three interviews. Round one, Sargon of Akkad versus Jess Phillips. Now, this was an interesting interview because Sargon of Akkad wasn't actually present for it. No, I'm talking more about the interview Jess Phillips gave with Victoria Derbyshire, in which the issue of Carl Benjamin and his 3-year-old joke about not raping Jess Phillips. Again, this saga is playing out, and what was shocking about this particular interview was Victoria Derbyshire, who gave the softest interview I think I've ever seen. Outside of Newsround, interviewing an 11-year-old who's just won a violin competition. I mean, it was just so soft. I mean, Derbyshire just did not push Jess Phillips on things, and she didn't have the facts. She had the kind of the lazy narrative that's been spun out by lazy media. She didn't, there was no fact checking here. There was no push. There was no attempt to interrogate Jess Phillips over this, because there are a number of things you could have hauled Jess Phillips up on this interview. Namely, why is she making political capital out of something that was allegedly settled 3 years ago? Because 3 years ago, when Sargon made the joke, admittedly offensive, in order to attract her attention, yes, she responded. They had a back and forth. They had an argument online. In the end, Carl lost his Twitter account from it. Moving on 3 years, she has said nothing in the last 3 years. And now on Victoria Derbyshire, Derbyshire's feeding her soft points, like, should somebody be banned for life for making a rape joke? That's actually what Victoria Derbyshire put across. An opinion. Not a question, an opinion. And why wasn't Derbyshire asking, well, you had this spat 3 years ago, you had the confrontation. Why didn't you do anything in the last 3 years? Why haven't you been lobbying for Carl Benjamin to lose all access to social media? Why are you encouraging the police to investigate him on alleged criminal wrongdoing now? Why haven't you done that the last 3 years? Why is it? Is there any truth to the claim that you laughed at men's rights issues, but you seemed contemptuous at the time when these issues came up, which Benjamin says is the reason why he sent you the offensive joke tweet in the first place? Come on, I could do a better job than Victoria Derbyshire. BBC, I'm available. But seriously, this was a soft interview, and it was sickening to watch. Not because I want to trivialize rape, but I can see a politician using something to her advantage. Oh, why does she want Carl Benjamin taken out of the political race here? Is it because, as she says, words have power? Derbyshire was just feeding her this stuff. Didn't even push back, didn't even say, really, words? But surely actions mean more than words. The act of raping someone, the act of threatening to rape someone, if it's a credible threat, far outweighs just words on the subject or bad taste jokes. But no, Jess Phillips says, no, you should be banned for life. You make jokes, banned for life for running for office. A violation of just rights, but with no law underpinning it. There is no law. This is just what Jess Phillips wants, as some kind of convention rather than law. Now, to me, it seems plain that what Jess Phillips is not, she's not interested in protecting people. Otherwise, she would tell everybody who has, every woman who's been sexually assaulted by, say, a Muslim grooming gang or gangs of young Muslim men who have been carrying out sexual assaults right across Europe. She would be saying, no, go to the police. First and foremost, you always go to the police as soon as the incident has happened, while things are fresh. The police actually want it that way. They can only gather the forensic evidence to build a case if you go to them straight away after the incident, even if it's traumatic. Do it. But no, she says, no, don't. We don't want racial tension, so don't go to the police. But now she's quite happy to have somebody be barred from standing for public office when no crime has been committed. She's happy that somebody is going to be investigated by the police for a joke, and she knows it's a joke and she's admitted it's a joke. So spare me. No, this is nothing more than Jess Phillips being the left-wing sharp operator. If you can get a political rival disbarred from even standing for office, it makes it easier for your person to get in. This is just tribal politics, Jess Phillips. And Victoria Derbyshire, nothing more than a dim patsy to it all. Second interview this week was Andrew Neil versus Ben Shapiro. This could have been the heavyweight title of the interviewing world, but in the end, it was hugely disappointing. In fact, I would go so far as to say it's a complete waste of time to watch it. There is absolutely, if you haven't seen it yet, don't bother. That nothing good comes out of this interview. Neither man comes out with their reputations enhanced. In fact, in some cases, their reputations have been tarnished. Now, I have a particular point of view of who came off worst, but it's at odds with what a lot of other people are saying. I believe it was 2-1 to Shapiro, but everything was an own goal. Right? It was shockingly bad interview by Andrew Neil. I mean, just his technique, which we praise, when he's got Owen Jones there, when he's got some kind of rabid leftist or some dimwit politician there, yeah, go. We like that attack dog style where he's hauling people up over things they've said and done. But this was bad. Andrew Neil was in Cathy Newman territory and with Jordan Peterson. It was a tired old hackney and dying out interview practice, which is just like, I'm going to search through old things that you've said, take them completely out of context because I'm looking for a gotcha moment. And Neil did that. He was dredging up stuff from 7 years that Shapiro said 7 years ago on Twitter, or that he dashed off on Breitbart. It's Twitter archaeology. This is what frustrates me about people on the right. When the left do Twitter archaeology to try and discredit Sargon, we go, oh, no, it's terrible. You shouldn't do Twitter archaeology. It's disingenuous. When Neil does it to Shapiro, that's somehow all right. Yes, Twitter archaeology. It's nonsense, right? You have to have a standard. This is why I keep saying honesty. Honesty. If it's bad for Sargon, it's bad for Shapiro. And I don't care if you don't like Shapiro, right? Twitter archaeology is it's bunk. It's a bunk discrediting tactic, okay? And if you have standards and you've got integrity when you want to fight the culture wars, just ditch that. Ditch the Twitter archaeology unless you can put it into proper context. And as long as you can say, if somebody says 7 years ago, this is terrible, this is my opinion, right? And then 7 years later, they've modified that opinion. They've said some things that give it a little bit more nuance, or perhaps have shifted slightly in their opinion. You can't use the archaeology. You have to use what their current stated belief is, right? You've got to be able to, if you want to go after what they say 7 to 10 years ago, you've got to show how what they said then is still relevant now, or you can point to how their journey from that stated position to what they state now has somehow been dishonest and disingenuous. Because if it is a genuine change of mind and heart, you can't use the old stuff. You just can't. It's dishonest. And that's what I think Neil was doing. He was going after Shapiro's old stuff. And I think after a while, Shapiro's big mistake was that he assumed Andrew Neil was another BBC leftist. It's not quite as cut and dried as that. Right? Andrew Neil is no Brian Stelter. He's no Don Lemon. That he's not in that league. And I think Shapiro's mistake is that he was starting to think of Neil in those terms. Neither man had prepared for that interview. Neither man had done the research on the other one. I mean, with Andrew Neil, it was worse in the fact that during the interview, he said, well, before this interview, I'd never even heard of you, Mr. Shapiro. And Neil was sneering at the kind of the YouTuber class, the YouTuber commentator class. He was sneering at him because of that. That's no reason to look down. It was mainstream media looking down at their noses. And frankly, if Neil's going to take that line, he's got to sort out his own house at the BBC in the mainstream media before he starts looking down on the YouTubers who sometimes are the most well, they're definitely more honest than mainstream media. And for Neil to play that card, rubbish. Shapiro capitulated in the end. I think he realised after a while he was going to get nothing out of this interview. He cut his losses, and then he later said, well, Neil got the better of me. Partially true. I think Neil shot himself in the foot a few times on the way. But opinion is divided. But at the end of the day, this is a pointless interview. Absolutely pointless. Nothing was scored. Nothing was said. If you hate Shapiro, you're going to hate Shapiro still. If you didn't like Andrew Neil before, you're still going to dislike Andrew Neil. Nothing was achieved. There's no dialogue emerged. There's no consensus. It's just rubbishy attack dog stuff from Neil as somebody who perhaps needed a little bit more an extended interview and a bit more of a deconstruction of their ideas, rather than just, this is what you said 7 years ago, these are words that you said on this issue, taken completely out of context. So yeah, it's utterly pointless. But all it's done, right, we've got more blue on blue action, right? So some people on the right who don't like Shapiro are saying, see, he's net negative. It's a term I absolutely hate. But what good is this doing? We on the right, and this is a bugbear of mine, we on the right, we love to take each other down. We spend more time sniping each other because we're not fitting some kind of ideological orthodoxy. And all the while, we've got to remember that what the left do so well, they're in lockstep. Right? If they've got an enemy in front of them, they don't start bickering among each other. They only bicker among each other when they haven't got an enemy in front of them. Right? We've got a big enemy in front of us, and what do? We snipe at each other because you're not as right-wing as me, or you're a hawk, and you're an international interventionist, and you're not free market enough. It's pointless. Douglas Murray has showed us the way. They try and take Scruton down. We all get in. We back our man. We back Scruton. Even if you think he's an old-fashioned, fuddy-duddy, dry conservative, not as good as Econ, doesn't matter. The right, we are not a cult. We are not a religious order, right? That's what the left do. We are an alliance of people with individual minds and thoughts, and we have different opinions. We have many varied opinions on any given subject, but we are an alliance. We've got to back each other up against dishonest agents. Right, the left are going to pick us off one by one. We allow ourselves to be picked off one by one because we don't back each other up. We look at, you don't hold your rifle the right way in the culture wars, so you're out. You're a net negative. Spare me. I have to calm down after all that. I'm just not used to getting that riled up. I'm normally a very mild, placid person. But I'll just give you an aside about Andrew Neil. Just another thing. It's an anecdote. So a few years ago, he did a thing on the Daily Politics where he criticised David Cameron. This was when Cameron was still Prime Minister. Cameron gave a speech where he said that Britain's role in World War II was always as the subordinate. And Neil kind of did a piece. He didn't put that to David Cameron. He's just said a piece in the studio to Cameron where he said, Mr. Cameron thinks that World War II began in 1941 when America entered. But I can't do Neil's accent properly. But he was saying that in the early part of the war, 39 to 41, before the Americans entered, Britain was not in a subordinate role. And I wrote into the Daily Politics saying, Andrew Neil, you are wrong, because in 1939 and 1940, Britain was subordinate to French military command. It was the French who were the supreme commanders of the Allied war effort in the first 2 years of the war. And I pointed that out to Andrew Neil, and I got a response. I got a response from the Daily Politics I got an email, and some of it was from the show's producer, and there was one paragraph from Andrew Neil. And the producer said, Andrew prides on doing his research thoroughly. He prides himself on the fact that when he speaks on a subject, he's thoroughly researched it first. And then I say paragraph, but it was more like a sentence, an extended sentence, where Andrew Neil said, I know what you're saying, Mr. Hughes, but in this matter, I am right, and that is all. He's wrong, but Andrew Neil doubles down. Never admits a mistake. Never. admits a mistake, even his hand was caught in the cookie jar, right? And you say you're trying to take a cookie. He said, "No, no, you're not. I am not taking cookie." How do you explain that then? I don't have to explain. My hand is in the. I don't even acknowledge that the hand is in the cookie jar. And you see, yeah, that's the kind of chap he is. Let's move on to the third interview this week, which is Marr versus Farage. And again, opinion is divided of who came out on top. Now, people who hate Nigel Farage, for there are many, believe Andrew Marr won hands down. Hands down, Marr just destroyed. Andrew Marr destroys Nigel Farage. However, I take the completely opposite point of view. Now, I don't say this as a fan of Farage. It's taken me a long time to warm to him. I always thought he was like a big mouth, getting on the soapbox, rabble-rousing, that kind of thing. I don't particularly see him as a great man of substance, and I've been slammed. But this is old UKIP from about 5 to 10 years ago, when it was just full of bitter middle-aged men who'd just gone through bad divorces, got fleeced by their ex-wives, and they were just, if you dare criticise Saint Nigel, you got it in the neck. But I do appreciate that he has his phenomenal rhetorical abilities, his ability to have galvanised the Brexit movement, the way he's got the Brexit Party functioning. Now, I saw Marr doing that thing, trying to find a gotcha, going Twitter archaeology or interview archaeology, because Farage isn't a social media person. He's another one of these people who sneers at the social media cast, the alternative media. He plays the mainstream media game very well, Farage. But it was all the crappy interviewing techniques that you associate with Cathy Newman and Jordan Peterson, and that Andrew Neil did. Marr was trying to do, but Marr is just not an attack dog. He's kind of toothless in that regard compared with Neil. But Farage, no, not having it. Bang, pathetic BBC. And Marr was caught out in being disingenuous when he says, "You say you admire Vladimir Putin." And Farage just came back quick and said, "No, I admire him as an operator, not as a human being." Now, as Farage is trying to explain, I don't admire him as a human being. Marr was trying to interrupt him, trying to get Farage to get in the way of Farage making that point and clearing that up, putting things into context. And also, I noticed something that, again, the body language side of it. So Farage is when he's rebutting, he kind of looks heavenwards, like, I can't believe that's happening again. I can't believe the inanity of this. And then when he's making a criticism, he's looking directly at Marr. Now, when the camera cuts to Marr, Marr's all over the place. He's looking down. It's sort of kind of like he's embarrassed being there. He's being taken to task. He's being taken down, and he's fumbling with papers and all that. Marr was caught out, no doubt about it. And I don't care if any Farage haters who are watching this. I don't care. Your man Marr lost, hands down. But this is we're just seeing, in these three interviews, we're just seeing the mainstream media's tactics laid bare, and the ammunition is there. More and more people are turning off mainstream media, and here's three examples why. So now I'm going to cover a story that loops back to what I was saying with Jess Phillips and her desire that we start criminalising people who say offensive things. Now, this week, the British radio and television presenter Danny Baker was fired from his job at the BBC because he put out a picture. Now, he does this occasionally. He's done a thing where sometimes he takes photographs from the news or from the historical archive and swaps one of the characters out with a chimpanzee or gorilla or ape or whatever. And he did that this week. He took a picture of Prince Harry and Meghan and the royal baby, and swapped out replaced the royal baby with a chimpanzee. Now, that's terrible optics. It is terrible. Do I think he was genuinely, deliberately being racist? No, I don't. This seems like a kind of a bad taste joke cracked by somebody who didn't think there was going to be repercussions from it. He didn't think people's sensitivity meters are dialed up that high. Welcome to the culture wars, Danny. Okay, this everybody's sensitivity dials are dialed up to the maximum. They're up to 11. Okay, so he's got sacked now. Getting sacked, you may have an opinion. Was it a sackable offence? Should there have been some other form of punishment? You know, slap wrist, a public apology, that kind of thing. A suspension rather than a sacking. Well, he was sacked, and then his name obviously dragged through the mud amongst the commentariat, the mainstream media, and people on social media. Is that enough? Okay, you've been sacked from your job and your name's now mud. No. It's not nearly enough, because now he has to be investigated by police for whatever crime has not, possibly one of these non-crime hate incidents. And this is the world that Jess Phillips wants, where you can, if you're offended, the first thing you should do is call the police. If you're actually physically attacked, don't call the police. But if you are offended by a joke that you hear or that you see, and you just don't like it and you think it's upsetting, call the police. This is the world we're in. This is why I keep urging all of us. We should not turn on one another. If you're on the centre, you're on the right, and you believe in freedom of speech and individuality, and you are opposed to the march of socialism and progressive ideology that will just control us all, you don't turn on each other. Right? You do not do this. You don't describe one another as net negatives. Okay, they're in lockstep. Whenever they come across us, they're in lockstep, and we need to take a leaf out of their book, right? So we don't go down this route, because that's how the Jess Phillips of this world succeed. They succeed when we break down. Okay, and so. Yeah, I want to say that as an encouragement to everybody, that I just think it's a waste of time turning on each other. So anyway, what's the last thing on my little list here? Give me some cheer. Well, no, because now the BBC ran a story this week about brave drag transgender Down syndrome people. So Down syndrome people dragging up. You know, is this a story? No. Is it particularly life-affirming? No. Why does this story exist? Again, this is just a continual assault on people's identity, and more reasons to divide us. And on that very depressing note, this biscuit is ironically called a Cadbury's Delight. Okay? So I didn't find much to delight in this week, and that really does take the biscuit. That is a delight. Jam filling.